A craft tracked on military radar, dropping from 80,000 feet to sea level in under a second. 20,000 people watching a mile-wide object cross 3 states in silence. A government that investigated 13,500 sightings and concluded the objects were real. And 250 children who all drew the same alien and haven't changed their story in 30 years. These are the UFO cases that are impossible to debunk. The Pentagon knows it, and the footage they just released proves it. The Tic Tac. On November 14, 2004, the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was running training exercises roughly 100 miles off the coast of San Diego, California. For several days before the encounter, radar operators aboard the USS Princeton had been tracking objects that shouldn't have existed. Contacts were appearing at 80,000 feet, well above the operational ceiling of any known aircraft, and dropping to sea level in less than a second. The operators had never seen anything move like that. They assumed it was a radar malfunction. It wasn't. When the contacts persisted, 2 FA-18 Super Hornets were scrambled to investigate. Commander David Fravor led the flight. When he arrived at the coordinates, he saw the ocean churning violently below him, as if something massive was just beneath the surface, displacing water in a pattern that didn't match any known submarine or natural phenomenon. Hovering above the disturbance was a smooth, white, oval-shaped object about 40 feet long. No wings, no rotors, no exhaust, no windows, no visible propulsion of any kind. It looked like a giant Tic Tac candy suspended in the air. Fravor descended toward it. The object reacted immediately. It mirrored his movements with impossible precision, turning as he turned, adjusting its position as if it was aware of every change in his flight path. Then, in an instant, it accelerated at a speed Fravor said he had never witnessed in over 20 years of military aviation. No sonic boom, no heat trail, no sound of any kind. It crossed his field of vision and vanished before he could process what had happened. Seconds later, radar operators detected it 60 miles away, sitting at the exact rendezvous point Fravor's jets were supposed to reach next, as if it knew where he was going. A subsequent flight captured the now famous FLIR-1 infrared footage of a similar object using advanced targeting cameras attached to an F/A-18. The government kept that video classified for over a decade. It wasn't until 2017, when former ATIP director Luis Elizondo resigned and helped leak the footage, that the public ever saw it. In 2020, the Pentagon formally confirmed the videos were authentic. They also confirmed they had no explanation for what the objects were, how they moved, or where they came from. Trained military pilots, advanced radar tracking, infrared cameras, multiple independent witnesses giving identical descriptions, and zero explanation from any government agency on Earth. The Tic Tac remains the single strongest UFO case ever recorded. The Washington Flap. In July 1952, strange objects appeared over the most heavily protected airspace in the world. Washington, D.C. Directly above the White House, the Capitol Building, and the Pentagon. During the Cold War, at the height of nuclear tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. Whatever was flying over the Capitol had chosen the most provocative location on Earth to show itself. Radar operators at Washington National Airport detected fast-moving objects, performing impossible maneuvers on the nights of July 19th and July 26th. Hovering in place, darting in random directions, making instant turns and sudden stops, then vanishing from the screen entirely, only to reappear moments later in a completely different position. Operators at Andrews Air Force Base confirmed the same contacts on their own radar systems. Two independent military radar installations tracking the same objects at the same time in restricted airspace. This was not a glitch. Fighter jets were scrambled both weekends, but when the jets approached, the objects disappeared from radar. When the jets left the area, the objects came back. They did this repeatedly over 4 consecutive nights, as if testing how the military would respond and demonstrating that they could outmaneuver anything sent after them. A Coast Guard officer managed to photograph the objects during one of the appearances. That photograph has never been debunked and remains unresolved. Thousands of people across the capital saw the lights with their own eyes. Newspapers printed hundreds of articles. The public panicked. President Harry Truman was personally briefed on the situation, making this one of the very few UFO events to reach the desk of a sitting president. The pressure on the government became so intense that the Air Force held one of its largest press conferences since the end of World War II, specifically to address the UFO sightings. Major General John Samford stood before reporters and offered the official explanation. Temperature inversions, a weather condition where warm air traps cooler air below it, bending radar signals and creating false images on screens. The operators and pilots who were actually there rejected that explanation completely. They said the objects moved like solid, controlled, intelligent craft, not like weather anomalies. The Washington Flap remains one of the most heavily documented and most debated UFO events in American history. The Phoenix Lights. On the night of March 13, 1997, up to 20,000 people across Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico watched something cross the sky that none of them could explain. A massive V-shaped craft with 5 to 7 bright, round lights along its underside moved slowly and silently overhead at low altitude. Witnesses estimated the object was over a mile wide. For perspective, the largest known aircraft on Earth has a wingspan of roughly 385 feet. This craft would have been 14 times that size. Some witnesses described it as a floating city passing over their heads. The sightings began around 7:30 p.m. and continued for hours as the object traveled from Henderson, Nevada, southeast, through the heart of Arizona, over Prescott, through Phoenix, and down toward Tucson before crossing into Mexico and disappearing around 10 p.m. The craft covered hundreds of miles at a steady, unhurried pace. Families watched from backyards. Police officers stopped their patrols to stare. Pilots radioed in reports from the air. Military veterans who understood aircraft dimensions said they had never seen anything like it. Some witnesses said the object flew so low that they could have hit it with a thrown ball. Others said it was so enormous that it blocked out the entire star field as it passed overhead, like a dark sheet being pulled across the sky. Thousands of phone calls flooded radio stations, police departments, and news stations that night. People who had never cared about UFOs were suddenly standing in their driveways with their mouths open. Arizona Governor Fife Symington initially tried to manage the panic. At a press conference, he joked about the event, bringing out an aide dressed in an alien costume to lighten the mood. The audience laughed. The tension broke, and the story was supposed to end there. But it didn't. 10 years later, Symington admitted publicly that he personally saw the object that night. He had been standing on his lawn in Phoenix when it passed over. As a former Air Force pilot, a man with thousands of hours of flight experience and training in aircraft identification, Symington knew what he was looking at. And it wasn't anything the Air Force had ever built. He called the craft enormous, otherworldly, and completely silent. He said keeping quiet about it for a decade was one of his greatest regrets. The military later claimed that at least some of the lights were flares dropped during a training exercise called Operation Snowbird. A 10 aircraft released illumination flares that appeared as glowing points in the sky, and officials said this explained the Phoenix lights. But that explanation only accounted for the second group of lights seen later that night. The earlier sighting, the one involving a mile-wide, V-shaped solid craft moving silently from Nevada to Mexico, was never addressed. The Belgian wave. Between November 1989 and 1990, over 13,500 people across Belgium reported seeing the same type of object in the sky. A large, dark, triangular craft, with bright circular lights at each corner and a pulsing red light in the center. Silent, low altitude, moving slowly enough to follow by car. The sightings were reported by civilians, police officers, and military personnel across the entire country. What made the Belgian wave unique in UFO history wasn't the sightings themselves. It was the government's response. The Belgian authorities did not deny, dismiss, or classify the reports. They did the opposite. They openly investigated every credible account, collected data systematically, interviewed witnesses on the record, and shared their findings with the public as they went. It was the first time in history a government worked transparently with its citizens to investigate a UFO wave. The most famous individual sighting happened on November 29, 1989, near the town of Eupen. Two Belgian police officers on routine patrol spotted a giant triangular craft hovering at low altitude. They followed it as it drifted slowly into town, where it hovered above the streets for roughly 45 minutes. The craft then moved toward a nearby lake, hovered there for another hour, and disappeared beyond the tree line. As if that weren't enough, a second similar craft appeared over the town and followed the same path before vanishing in the same direction. The most dramatic moment of the entire wave came on March 30th, 1990. Radar systems tracked an unknown object over Belgian airspace. The Air Force scrambled two F-16 fighter jets to intercept. The pilots managed to lock onto the target with onboard radar, but the object changed speed and altitude so rapidly that the jets couldn't maintain pursuit. It dropped altitude at extreme speed, executed turns that would have crushed any human pilot, evaded radar detection, and disappeared. Ground radar stations at multiple separate locations confirmed the same unknown signal simultaneously. After thousands of reports and hundreds of formal investigations, the Belgian Air Force published its conclusions. The objects were real. They were physical. They were under intelligent control. And they were unlike anything known to exist on Earth. No final identification was ever made. No government has claimed the craft as their own. The Belgian wave remains the most thoroughly documented mass UFO event in European history. And the government that investigated it openly, honestly, and transparently still wants answers. The Aerial School Encounter. On the morning of September 16, 1994, roughly 250 children aged 6 to 12 were playing outside during morning recess at the Aerial School in Ruwa, Zimbabwe. Every adult in the school was inside a faculty meeting. No teachers were on the playground. The children were completely unsupervised when the encounter began. Multiple silver objects appeared in the sky directly above the playground. They flickered in and out of visibility, vanishing and reappearing in different positions, as if testing whether anyone was watching. Then the objects descended into a field just beyond the school boundary, past a line of trees that marked the edge of the playground. Some children ran inside screaming. Others, driven by curiosity, walked toward the landing site to see what had come down. What the children described was remarkably consistent across dozens of independent accounts. An oval, metallic craft, about the size of a small bus, was sitting in the grass. It was smooth, silent, and reflective. Standing beside it, and on top of it, were two small beings, roughly 3 feet tall, with enormous black eyes, tiny mouths, and tight-fitting dark suits. One of the beings was walking along the surface of the craft, as if inspecting it. The other was standing beside it, motionless, staring directly at the children. Then the being on the ground began approaching the children. It moved slowly. Then it vanished, and reappeared at its starting position beside the craft. It did this multiple times. Some children described the experience as if time itself was repeating, bending, or standing still. The being wasn't walking back. It was resetting, like a loop that kept replaying the same few seconds. Many of the children received the same message telepathically. The beings seemed frustrated, warning them that humans were destroying the planet. Some children saw vivid mental images of environmental devastation, scorched earth, dead forests, blackened skies. Others felt overwhelming sadness and urgency that had no source they could identify. The emotions weren't their own. They were being placed there. At first, the teachers didn't believe any of it. Children exaggerate. Children play games. But when the principal instructed every child to draw what they saw, working separately in different classrooms with no coordination, the drawings were strikingly similar. The same disc-shaped craft, the same small figures, the same large black eyes. Children who were 6 drew the same thing as children who were 12. Over 30 years later, every one of those children, now adults with careers and families of their own, still stands by what they saw that day. Not a single person has ever recanted. Not one has called it a prank or a misunderstanding. They all say the same thing. It happened. It was real. And the message hasn't changed. The Mexico Saucer. On March 20th, 2021, a video surfaced from Mexico that looked like it had been pulled straight from a science fiction film. A disc-shaped metallic object was hovering in a perfectly clear blue sky. It had a rounded dome on top, a small antenna-like protrusion at the peak, and bright lights along its equatorial band and underside. The craft appeared to be made of polished metal, reflecting sunlight across its surface with a sheen that suggested real physical material rather than a digital effect. The detail in the footage was extraordinary. You could see panels on the dome, seams in the metalwork, the curvature of the upper structure transitioning into the darker, flatter underside. Bright orbs of light were visible at multiple points around the edge and bottom of the craft. This was not a blurry dot on a shaky phone video. This was a structured, three-dimensional object, filmed at close enough range and high enough resolution to examine its surface features frame by frame. The footage spread rapidly across social media and UFO research forums. Ufologists and video analysts called it one of the clearest flying saucer recordings ever captured. The object appeared to hover with no visible means of support, producing no sound, no exhaust, no vapor trail, and no disturbance in the air around it. It matched the classic flying saucer shape described by witnesses going back to Kenneth Arnold's 1947 sighting, except this time the camera was close enough to see real detail. No official statement was ever issued by the Mexican government. No aviation authority confirmed or denied unusual activity in the area. The footage remains unverified and unexplained. Skeptics have suggested it could be a drone, a model, or CGI, but no one has successfully demonstrated how the footage was faked, and the lighting, reflections, and atmospheric consistency across the video have made definitive debunking difficult. For believers and skeptics alike, the Mexico saucer footage raises a simple question. If this isn't real, then whoever made it is operating at a level of visual effects that rivals Hollywood. And if it is real, then we have been looking at the truth this entire time and refusing to accept it. The Pentagon UFO files are open. On May 8, 2026, the Pentagon did something unprecedented. Under direct orders from President Trump to declassify all files related to unidentified aerial phenomena, the Department of War launched a public website called war.gov/UFO and began uploading 161 previously classified files spanning nearly 8 decades of unexplained encounters. The release was hosted on the Pursue portal, the presidential unsealing and reporting system for UAP encounters. The files were drawn from multiple agencies, including the FBI, NASA, the Department of Defense, and the State Department. They included military infrared footage from encounters over Iraq, Syria, the UAE, Japan, Greece, and Africa. Apollo mission transcripts and photographs from Apollo 11, Apollo 12, and Apollo 17 documenting unexplained bright particles, anomalous objects, and unidentified fragments in both lunar and Earth orbit. FBI investigative files containing hundreds of pages of eyewitness accounts describing glowing orbs, high-speed metallic objects, and craft that materialized from bright light. And civilian reports dating back to a 1947 farmer near Stockton, California, who watched a wobbling object hover above his house while his chickens panicked. One 2022 military clip from an undisclosed location in the Middle East showed an oval-shaped object streaking across the frame at high speed. A December 2025 infrared image captured an unidentified object over the western United States. A 2025 report from Africa documented a military operator encountering a UAP during active operations. None of these cases were resolved. All of them are now available to anyone with an internet connection. Trump posted on Truth Social. The people can decide for themselves what the hell is going on. Have fun and enjoy. The Pentagon confirmed it would continue releasing additional materials on a rolling basis, with new batches posted every few weeks as files are discovered and declassified. For decades, the government told the world there was nothing to see. Now the evidence is on a public website. The Tic Tac footage, the Washington radar data, the Phoenix witness reports, the Belgian investigations, the aerial school testimonies, and 161 new files that prove the government has been watching these things for 80 years. Something is seriously off. And for the first time in history, the proof is open to everyone. The Pentagon's footage is real. The witnesses are credible. And the cases you just heard are the ones that nobody has been able to debunk. What do you think the government is still hiding? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.